What's up, everybody? My name is Kenneth, and I am a foreigner living in the Philippines, here today to react and learn to why 30% of sailors are Filipino. This video has been recommended to me, and I also saw it myself in the YouTube recommendations from YouTube, and this seemed very interesting to me. Apparently, it's kind of linked to why most of the nurses in many other countries are also Filipino. And I really wanted to know that. I asked that question in a previous video. And I think this video is going to answer that question for me. So I thought it would be interesting if I sit down and watch this with you guys. And then maybe I'll learn something new. So yeah, guys, let's just get right into the video. Let's go.
Hong Kong is 92% ethnically Chinese, but stroll through the central business district on any given Sunday and you wouldn't know it. Thousands upon thousands of domestic helpers socialize on cardboard scattered across parks, walkways, and sidewalks on their one and only day off. 55% are from the Philippines, and virtually all women.
Wow, really? What is a domestic helper? Is that just like workers hired from abroad? 55% are Filipino and 43% Indonesian. So it's basically none of the domestic. So there's none of the helpers, whatever that means, in Hong Kong is from Hong Kong, basically, or Chinese. Wow, incredible.
A similar dynamic, but for men, plays out on the high seas. Filipinos make up 1.4% of the world's population, but roughly 30% of the world's shipping crew.
Wow! 30% of the entire world's sailors are Filipino, actually. The title is not clickbait. He's telling the truth. Only 1.4% of the population is Filipino, but 30%. Wow. Incredible.
Cruise, for instance, and there's a very good chance you'll have a Filipino maid, cook, or server. It's not just low-skill work either. 1/5 of California registered nurses are from the Philippines, despite comprising only 4% of its population.
Incredible.
On any given day, 10% of all living Filipinos are employed overseas, 2.3 million of which are temporary workers.
Does that not hurt the Philippines, kinda? If all the workers work outside of the Philippines? How does that benefit the Philippines? Like, what do Filipinos gain from this? I guess maybe they get a higher salary overseas. But then again, what does the government earn? Like, I feel like this is like a big problem for the Filipino government, right?
The reason may seem obvious. Money. The average nurse can make 15 times more working abroad.
Okay.
Even domestic helpers make far more than they would at home. But why the Philippines specifically? The country is neither the world's largest, fastest growing.
And I asked this question in a previous video. I said, why not China then? They have a lot more people, right? So why the Philippines?
Nor even poorest potential source of labor. Being the cheapest is a tough competitive advantage to maintain in a world of 7 billion people. There will always be someone somewhere more desperate. And yet, the Philippines has remained the world's go-to source of labor for decades, almost monopolizing entire industries.
I think maybe because the people, not only is it cheap to hire them, but they also work very hard. Probably has to do with Filipino morals and work culture and stuff. I don't know, I'm just guessing.
So, what's the real reason? Sponsored by Brilliant. Learn math, science, and computer science the intuitive way with a link in the description. In 1973, the Middle East went on strike, cutting off the world's supply of oil. Between December 1973 and January 1974, the global price of crude more than doubled from $26 to $61 per barrel. For the Philippines, which imported 80% of its oil, this made a bad situation much worse. The Marcos government was already busy fighting a communist rebellion, had declared martial law, and was suffering a balance of trade deficit.
Was communism very popular in the Philippines? I don't know anything about that. I know a lot of countries in Southeast Asia, they had communist movements, some even became communist. But I never heard about like a communist movement in the Philippines. Interesting.
Consumer prices went through the roof, and unemployment soon followed. But the rise in oil prices had a second unintended consequence: the fundamental transformation of the global shipping industry. When the price of oil rose, demand for tankers fell dramatically. But because a ship ordered today is only actually delivered years down the road, their supply continued rising long after they were no longer needed.
Oh,
As you
okay.
can see, demand per tanker fell for roughly the next 10 years. And during this period of excess supply, shipping became far less profitable. To cut costs, companies increasingly began registering their ships in flag of convenience countries like Panama and Liberia, where they could bypass national labor laws. Unions negotiated jobs for Japanese, Norwegian, and Greek captains,
Norwegian. I'm Norwegian. Interesting.
but the bottom ranks were suddenly open to the world. And who better to fill
Wait, really? So they made sure that like top roles were from like developed countries? That's kind of messed up. But the bottom roles, they didn't really get like labor unions or like protections, right? That's kind of weird.
them than the masses of recently unemployed Filipinos? Shipping companies didn't just get access to a cheap, willing, and able workforce fluent in English, the international language of the sea.
Oh, yeah, that makes so much sense. Because why not China? Because the Filipinos are really good at English, and they're in a like you said, in a position where they would accept this, right? Interesting. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
But also their favorite kind: temporary. Migrant workers are a capitalist vision of globalization, perpetuating national borders when convenient, bypassing them when not. By importing labor from abroad, you profit from wage differentials between countries, but don't have to worry about anti-immigrant backlash. You can hire them as soon as you have a job to be done, and fire them just as fast when it's over, with none of the annoying paperwork. Virtually
Really?
all the power in this
So there's no protection at all. You can just be fired on the spot. Very strange.
relationship lies with the employer, some of which even take away the passports of their workers. Until
Wow.
March of last year, for instance, domestic helpers in Saudi Arabia needed their employer's permission to leave the country. Needless to say, this
Crazy.
serendipitous combination of push in the form of unemployment in the Philippines and pull in the form of demand for cheap labor produced an explosion of Filipino migrant workers. In 1960, 15% of all seafarers were Asian. By 1987, that number had more than quadrupled to 67%.
Wow. And a large percent of that will be Filipinos, right?
The next wave came from where the first originated, the Middle East. The Gulf states had grand visions for what to do with their new wealth, but no one willing to actually build their underwater hotels and giant empty picture frames. That's where foreign labor
They built an empty picture frame. That looks so stupid. I'm sorry.
comes in. Today, 26% of Filipino migrants work in Saudi Arabia, 14% in the UAE, 6
Wow.
in Kuwait, and 5 in Qatar. A significant portion of the
Wow.
rest work in Hong Kong or Singapore as domestic helpers, doing the laundry, childcare, cooking, cleaning, and everything in between for middle-class households. Some families even have 2 or 3
What's the average wage for these people? Like, what's the salary like? Do they make enough to survive? I guess they make more in these overseas jobs than the jobs in the Philippines because that's why they're going, right? Interesting.
But this is really only half the answer to our original question: why Filipinos came to dominate these specific labor niches.
Right.
50 years ago, the reason was basically coincidence, timing more than anything. But even if the Philippines was the cheapest source of labor in 1970, it hasn't remained that way for 5 consecutive decades. What began as a temporary response to a unique set of circumstances, in other words, soon became a deliberate strategy.
There you have
The money-
the tourist slogan, right? It's more fun in the Philippines. Wow, I would like to ride this jeepney. That's a good jeepney.
Circumstances, in other words, soon became a deliberate strategy. The money workers send home, called remittances, has grown from a nice side gig to a pillar
Okay, I was wondering about this earlier in the video. Like, how does the Philippines government profit from this? Because I didn't think that allow this 10% of Filipinos to work overseas if they didn't profit from it. But it's the remittances probably. I guess, do you have to tax this? Do you have to tax this to the Philippines government? And then they make, yeah, it's a large share of the GDP. Let's see how much.
on which the entire national economy depends, representing
Wow. Oh, wow. It used to be over 12% of the GDP. Now it's right under 10%. That's insane. That is incredible. That's absolutely insane.
10% of the country's GDP.
Wow.
At 35 billion US dollars a year, remittances could be considered the Philippines' second largest export, just behind electronics at 38 billion, 3 times higher than third place machinery, and 13 times larger than fourth place copper. In the words of one former official, without these overseas jobs reducing domestic unemployment, there would be revolution.
Okay, so the government doesn't actually mind this. It's not like a problem they're trying to fix, I think.
And so, to sustain this flow of cash, the Philippine government has become an unofficial broker of labor.
Oh,
When the
okay.
president called herself the CEO of a global Philippine enterprise in 2003, she wasn't kidding. The state functions in many ways like a corporation, one whose core
Wow.
business is selling one particular commodity, labor. Government departments travel to trade shows, negotiate with foreign countries, and sometimes even place labor directly. It even does marketing, producing posters, videos, and ads reinforcing the perception of
These are made by the Filipino government? This is really the Filipino seafarers, resilient, adaptable, English proficient, and loyal. They are just among the reasons why Filipino seafarers are preferred by the world's best fleet. Able minds, able hands to foreign lands. The Filipino worker. Wow. How do Filipino people think about this? Is this like a positive thing? That you have the opportunity to go work overseas and make more money? Or is this kind of seen as a negative thing? Let me know in the comments.
Filipinos as loyal, hardworking, and docile. Yet, despite all this, quote, the state does not promote overseas employment as a means to sustain economic growth and achieve national development. The government, in other words, is uneasy about its participation in what some have called legal human trafficking. It takes credit for the
yeah.
inflow of remittances, but no
It
response.
seems kind of weird to me. Like, it seems like a flawed kind of system to me. But I mean, if people are happy with it, then it works. But I don't know. I want to know if you Filipino people think. What do you think about this? How do you feel about this?
Ability when workers are abused. When they return home, workers are greeted as heroes, not unlike members of the military in America.
Wow, really?
Sending money home is characterized as an act of nationalism, and each year the president celebrates Migrant Workers' Day.
Really?
But it's not just the government
nice.
reinforcing this system. You might think Filipino migrant workers would aggressively fight back against these stereotypes. And some do. But many don't see themselves as being exploited. Despite high rates of abuse, harassment, and harsh working conditions, overseas work is often viewed.
No private room, and a lot of people. No, that's the white part. Okay, so some people get physical abuse, still way too much. No regular day off. Wow. So you work 7 days a week? For some of them work 7 days a week. And most of them don't have a private room. Wow.
In a positive light, as an opportunity. An opportunity that's by no means guaranteed. Many see themselves as competing with Indonesians, Pakistanis, and Nepalese. Reinforcing stereotypes, even about oneself, is a powerful way of preserving those limited opportunities.
There's even South Koreans, and that's a pretty developed, rich country, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of countries participating in this, but the Philippines is off the charts so much.
But more than anything else, what reinforces this outflow of labor is economics. Imagine that a bundle of cash 10 or 15 times the average local wage fell out of the sky and into every 10th house in your country each and every month.
Right. Okay, so he just said 10 times more? Is that what he said?
Imagine that a bundle of cash 10 or 15 times the average local wage fell out of the sky.
Yeah, if you if you give someone 10 or 15 times the local wage to work overseas, I don't understand why a lot of people did that. Yeah. I think even I would do that when I was younger. I did work overseas. I left Norway to work outside of Norway. But for 15 times the wage, wow, incredible. I think everyone would take that.
And into every 10th house in your country each and every month. Why would that lucky 10% of the population look for a job? Think about what kind of weird first, second, and third order effects this sudden airdrop of cash would have on the economy. Currency devaluation, inflation, lower real incomes, and greater inequality between families receiving and not receiving remittances.
Okay, yeah.
The problem
that makes
with
sense,
treating labor
actually.
as a resource, in other words, is that it leads to the resource curse. What would these families buy with all that money? A new car, an extra room in the house, or even an extra house. Perhaps the most common purchase is a college degree. But this is not quite the escape from
You have to pay for college degrees in the Philippines, like in the US. It's not covered by like taxes. It's not free. So it's the same way. I've also learned that like healthcare is not free either. So is the system in the Philippines set up like it is in the US, where you don't get free education and healthcare? You kind of have to pay for it or like buy insurance, something like that. I'd like to know. I'd like to learn more about that also. If there's a good video on that, then please let me know.
poverty and investment in the nation's future that it may appear. Remittances are directly responsible for the education of millions of young Filipinos, but they're also
Wow.
responsible for the lack of local demand for that very education. The end goal of a college degree.
I don't think they're doing their homework, guys. I mean, look at this. They're both on their phones. Do your homework. Kidding.
Demand for that very education. The end goal of a college degree very often is to immigrate, often as a nurse, to the United States, in what has been called migrate to educate to migrate. First, a mother, father, or
Wow.
both go overseas as domestic helpers or sailors, sending whatever they can home to their children. Those children are often expected to use that money to train as nurses, immigrate to the US, and take their turn sending remittances home.
Wow.
In 2015, more
It's crazy how much families work together in the Philippines compared to where I'm from in Norway. In Norway, you kind of just do what you want and nothing is expected of you. And there's no like working together or family structures like this. Like over generations. Like I go work overseas to get my children an education so they can go work overseas and take care of me when I'm old. Like that is insane amount of teamwork and cooperation. That's very impressive to me. We don't have anything like that in Norway.
Filipino nurses were employed abroad, then passed the nursing board exams at home. Until the practice was banned, nursing students were so desperate to acquire the experience needed to go overseas that many paid hospitals to allow them to work.
Wow.
For the lucky few whose parents sacrificed their labor abroad, who themselves studied for years and years and years acquiring degrees, and who have the incredible luck of entering the labor market at the right moment, this is a powerful pathway to a better life for their families back home. But think about what's really happening here. Individuals are expected to work overseas just to pay for an education for the chance of leaving, giving them the privilege of supporting their families. The state may take credit for this system, but for their families, these individual moms, dads, uncles, and aunts are fulfilling the role of the state, providing basic things like food and education. And
Yeah, that's very true.
because it relies on an immense amount of hard work, sacrifice, and luck.
Guys, I was at this park and I heard there's some drama about this building, I think. Is there a good video on this building? I really want to know what this controversy was about. I don't know if it was this one, but there was a tall building behind this park, and some locals told me there was controversy about it. So if there's a video about that, I'd love to watch that.
And because it relies on an immense amount of hard work, sacrifice, and luck, this is not a sustainable, equitable process. It can't really be scaled or systematized, and it relies on an increasingly tenuous assumption that their labor and skills are appreciated and welcome abroad. All it takes is a change of visa rules in a foreign country or a pandemic to nullify all those years of sacrifice.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Last year, for instance, the Philippine government capped the number of nurses allowed to work overseas, forcing...
Okay, so here we see the government does actually kind of limit this, because it makes sense from the eyes of the government. Like, this is like something you kind of lose out on. You lose out on all the skilled people, right? So they're actually setting caps to the detriment of the people. But yeah, that's interesting.
All but 5,000 to stay home, risking their lives for very little money. So what did they do? Many go back to school in hopes that a second or third degree will make them more competitive.
Wow.
According to one study, 39% of working Filipinos are overeducated for their jobs, yet a quarter are undereducated.
What?
This
How does
is
that
just
work? What? How does that work?
one more way the traditional system of education fails students, by preparing them for jobs that no longer exist. Learning should be flexible, interesting, and based on practical, universal skills like problem solving, logic, and math. All things which today's sponsor, Brilliant, was problems start your day
Alright,
on the
and
right.
that's the end of that video. That's a really good video. This is by Polymatter. I'm gonna give this a like. I feel like I learned a lot. It all makes a lot more sense to me now, and I got better perspective on like how the government treats this and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any other videos you want me to react to, then please let me know in the comments and I'll check it out. And if I end up reacting to it, then I'll give you credit. And as always, guys, I make one video every day reacting to the Philippines, just like this, learning about history, customs, and culture. So if you like that type of stuff, then you should subscribe for more. Alright, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.